Autumn. It's finally here, and I must say I'm so excited to share my writing plans for the autumn season. It's the perfect time of year to get cozy, hunker down and immerse myself in the world I'm building. Alright, so first up, let's talk about my goals for the autumn. For me, autumn is always a time of renewal, where I assess the projects I've been working on throughout the year and decide where to focus my energy before the year ends. So this year I've set myself 3 goals. Finish the first draft of my current work in progress book, which is Heathens, book 3. It's a low fantasy novel that I've been working on for the last few months. I'm about 70% of the way through, so the goal is to get the draft done by the end of November. I'll say more about the story later, but I want to push through with it, even if the draft is rough. I'd rather get it done than have it looking perfect. Perfection can always come later. I also have new projects. Now, I've been developing ideas for a new book, which is going to be a dark fantasy, with a really strange point of view. And my goal for the autumn is to complete a detailed outline so I can start drafting early next year. My third major goal is to polish my short stories. As I've mentioned before, I've been working on quite a few fantasy short stories that are almost ready. Just to make sure they're okay this autumn, I want to go through them with a fine-tooth comb and get any feedback and start putting them on video as well. So let's talk about the main project, my current work in progress, which is the Heathens Book 3 series. It's a low fantasy novel set in a magical world within London where ancient, forgotten magic exists beneath the everyday facade of the city. The story follows witches and warlocks and other magical creatures who are hell-bent on destroying each other in the city. It specifically focuses on 2 magical houses on the banks of the River Thames, which act as a sanctuary for troubled or abandoned witches, warlocks and magical creatures. I've been really excited about how the plot and characters are developing. Now, one of my goals for this draft is to make sure that all character arcs mirror and contrast with each other. One, for instance, begins as someone who doesn't believe in intervening in the magical world and doesn't want to get involved in any conflicts, ends up having to save someone in the non-magical world. But, by contrast, the other warlock, Luca, is desperate to prove himself and saves the life of a dying human, an act which is strictly forbidden in their world. Now, all these different characters and their relationships will form the key dynamics of the series, from the beginning to the end. I'm aiming to have the manuscript at around 100,000 words by the time I finish this draft. So far, I'm at about 70, which means I've got a decent chunk of writing left. I've scheduled myself to write about 2,000 words a day for the next few weeks, which will help me hit my goal by late November. And then some. After that, it'll be time for me to take a break and then revise. Next up is my dark fantasy novella. This is a new project that I'm still in the outlining phase for, but I've been itching to get started on it. What excites me about this novella is that it's set in a world very different to what I would normally write. It's darker, moodier, and it's got a lot more of a depressive influence. The story takes place in a dark apartment block in an Eastern European city. The main character is a depressed, anxiety-ridden visitor who is visiting the city for a few months, but ends up staying for a few years. The block is unusually quiet, and the neighbours seem friendly enough. The main character picks up a few donated items which are left out with a for donation sign. But of course, it turns into something much bigger, with an ancient curse, dark magic, and a lot of betrayal. My goal for this autumn is to finalize the plot, Right now I'm focusing on tightening up the central conflict and fleshing out the supporting characters. I want the novella to be around 30,000 to 40,000 words, so it'll be a shorter project compared to my novels, but it's going to be very intense. However, I must add at this point that I've tried to write novellas which have just ended up being books, so watch this space. One thing I'm really looking forward to exploring is the world building. The magic system in the story is much more subtle and creepy, more about manipulation and illusion than grand displays of power. I've been thinking a lot about how magic could corrupt both the user and the world around them, and that's going to play a big role in the story's themes. And then we come to the third big goal for the season: revising and recording the audio for my short fantasy stories. I've got quite a few short stories that I've been working on this year, and I'm really close to being ready to upload them to my new channel. The first story is a thriller-inspired piece that takes place in a little town and follows the point of view of a teenage girl who is being comforted by her parents and brother. As the story unfolds, we realize that all isn't as it appears, and the young girl is not as she seems. The second story is a little more experimental. It deals more with a magical narrative told from the point of view of a character experiencing the same day over and over, and unable to make much progress in his life, each time unraveling a different layer of a mystery. This one was fun to write, but the structure has been tricky. The third story is more in line with the classic sword and sorcery. It's rather fast-paced, with a clockmaker protagonist who passes away and leaves his shop to a young girl. So once I feel good about these stories, I'll be uploading them. Hopefully I'll have some good news to share about them in the next few weeks. So those are my autumn writing goals. Now that I've shared them, I want to talk a little bit about how I'm structuring my writing routine to make sure I stay on track. For me, autumn is all about building a sustainable routine that keeps me motivated but doesn't lead to burnout. So this is what I've been doing. As I mentioned earlier, I'm aiming for about 2,000 words a day on my novel, which has been manageable. Some days are better than others, but I have to be consistent. I've also been dedicating the first 2 hours of my day to writing and jotting down any inspiration before I check my emails or I get distracted by social media or my dogs or phone calls. It's been an absolute game changer for my productivity. Writing can be intense, so I've made a point to take regular breaks and do very small side activities. A nice walk, a new book, or watching my favourite shows. Balance is everything. The crucial thing here is not to go over the allocated time and not turn the binge into a whole day affair. So, those are my autumn writing plans. I'm really excited about what's ahead, and I'd love to hear what you're working on this season. If you're drafting a new novel, are you revising your manuscripts, are you working on poetry? If you're writing, just please feel free to share, all are welcome. Whatever new project you're starting on, let's talk about it and let's find out what your motivations are and what your goals are. We all need goals for a happy writing autumn. I'll see you in the next video.